Hello everyone, welcome to the first and maybe the last in I guess a series of videos talking about a series of books. I guess I could also apply this to like a TV series or something if, I ever felt the desire to do so. But for now we're talking about book series, and this is just trying a new series out that I've never delved into before, and I think it's just a good excuse to finally tick off the list some book series in particular that I've had on my mind to read and had on my TBR for years at this point for some of them, just never got round to, and it's just a moment where I can sit myself down and say, just do it for God's sake, man. So here we are. This is me going through the entire series of a set of books so far, and just seeing how I feel about them. So this is a brand new series to me, brand new author to me, I guess, although I'm very, very familiar with him, particularly as a British person. But this is, if I can grab it, the Thursday Murder Club series by Richard Osman. These started in 2020, I believe this first one came out, followed by The Man Who Died Twice in 2021, The Bullet That Missed in 2022, and The Last Devil to Die in 2023. He then took a year off. He took 2024 off and wrote, I think it's called We Solve Murders, which is an entirely different murder mystery series. And then this year, 2025, the fifth Thursday Murder Club book is coming out. I want to say it's called The Impossible Fortune or something like that. And yeah, that's due out in September, like the week after my birthday this year. So hopefully I'll be able to read that when it comes out and, make sure I properly avoid spoilers for that one. Not that I had any of these spoiled for me, which is nice. But yeah, so I'm hoping to be caught up on this series by then. And that just, all I need to do is simply read 4 books. Easy. To be fair, I have already read the first one, which is why I'm starting to record this vlog now. I've been meaning to delve into this series for quite a while. I remember, it kind of came out and it was a bestseller and rave reviews and everything kind of kept pouring in. And as more books came out, I saw more people loving the series and people saying it gets better and better and better. I do think, actually, the latest book, The Last Devil to Die, I think is like the best reviewed one in the series so far. So as far as I am aware, it's going to get better and better and better. Whether I think that's the case, we'll have to wait and see when I read the entire series so far and get caught up. As it stands, I've only read this first one, but I thought may as well get started recording this video now. I was going to wait until I read the entire series and then kind of give my thoughts on it, but I thought it'd just be better to do it after I finish each book, just so my thoughts on each book and any things I want to say about them are still fresh in my mind so I don't forget. I really like Richard Osman anyway, as like a host and a presenter and stuff. He's basically always on TV in Britain. He's always doing something. He was like one of the main hosts of a game show here called Pointless for years and years, and I think Pointless was actually like his idea. I think it was his concept. He was sort of the guy in the chair with that show. He doesn't present that anymore, but he has his own shows like Richard Osman's House of Games. He'll just be like a guest on TV shows and all sorts of stuff, and obviously he is an author. I think this is like his debut novel as well, and I will say, as like a debut, very impressive stuff. So the overall premise of the Thursday Murder Club series is that it's set in a British retirement home. I think it's in Kent. I don't know if it's based on a real one or not. I'd have to ask Richard Osman. And there are 4 residents at this retirement, I guess it's almost like a retirement village based on how it's described. There's a lot like there for them to do and everything. There's like swimming pools and all sorts. So I guess it's like a retirement village. And there are 4 residents who live there. We have Elizabeth, we have Joyce, who I would say is kind of the main character. We see a lot of the others as well. I mean, I think we particularly see Elizabeth and Joyce. I don't feel like the 2 men are as prominent, at least not in this first one. I've only read the first one, that may change. But Joyce, certainly in this first one, is like the main character. She's the newest member of the Thursday Murder Club, which these 4 have kind of, they're all in this club together. meet every Thursday try to solve unsolved murders and murders from, decades and decades ago. For the most part, the book is written in kind of like third person, but some chapters, and there's like, the chapters are really short in this, at least this first book. There's like 115 chapters in this book, so most of them are only a couple of pages, but sometimes they are written in first person from Joyce's point of view, because she's actually keeping a diary and she's like explaining the events that are happening, and so it's a really good insight into her character. I don't know if that's always going to be the case in future books, that Joyce has that, or if we see points of view of a different character in each book, which would be interesting. But certainly with this one, we get more of an insight, personally into Joyce's head, because, we get to see her diary. I'd say Joyce is essentially like the grandma we'd all hope we'd have, like just the classic, like, sweet old lady. A bit of a pushover. I think she kind of admits that to herself at one point in this book. A people pleaser for sure, but she does like to get up to a bit of mischief if the mood strikes her, if it feels right for her to have a bit of fun, she will do so, and I think she tries to see the best in situations for sure. Then we have Elizabeth, who is, I would say, like the leader of the club, so the one who like spearheads their investigations. She has a very mysterious past and lots of like connections that get her more answers on cases than the police seem to get. Yeah, she's, I don't want to say cold-hearted. I think she's very logical about things, and I don't think she necessarily understands or doesn't want to openly show emotion, because that's not how they're going to solve murders, by wearing their heart on their sleeve or anything like that. So I think people like that do rub her the wrong way, and she certainly comes into crosshairs with some members of the police in this book for having that attitude. She's more than willing to kind of break the law if it gets her answers, basically, and she has a lot of fun with that. And then the two guys, we have Ron, who is sort of like a lad's lad almost, but there's a lot of heart to him. Like with Elizabeth, you actually kind of see there's a great deal of heart to her as well, but she just doesn't really like to showcase that. I think Ron's very similar, not quite as stubborn about that, I would say, as Elizabeth is, but he's certainly set in his views at times. I wouldn't say he's got necessarily up-to-date good views on things, and I was quite surprised that some characters do have sort of unlikable qualities like that, but I do appreciate that Richard Osman has that, because sadly I think it's somewhat realistic to sort of 70, 80-year-olds. Like, I think most of the characters, if not all four of the main characters who are in the club, are pushing 80. So Ron's very much like that. I feel like Ron is the character I know the least coming off of this book, but he has a son who kind of plays a big role in like the mystery of this first book as well. He's very opinionated about things, but I think more often than not his heart is in the right place, and he's on the brink of toxic masculinity, I think, but I wouldn't say he's in that bracket, and I just think he gets a bit lonely, and he appreciates having people around him and having friends and having somewhere where he can feel safe, but he doesn't like to admit that, I think would be a good way of summarising my thoughts on how Ron is. And then we have Ibrahim, who is... he's kind of the nerd. I don't just say he's like the nerd of the group. He's very into like facts and figures, and doing calculations. He'll be the guy that you come to like work out, like, how long would it take you to get from this place to this place, and would that mean that this person could have potentially done a murder in that span of time? He'd be like, well, I'll look at it this way and this way and this way, and he's the one who comes to the meetings with the spreadsheets and all the data, and is very, very happy when someone asks him questions that mean he can give like a big presentation and show off all the calculations and sums that he's done. He's very much that, and he gets very into that side of things. He has a very dry sense of humour, which I think all the characters kind of do. Richard Osman's writing is just a very dry sense of humour, which very much appeals to me because I have the same style of humour, so it really did land for me. I think maybe if you're not British, you may not, at least reading the book, I think an audio would be a good way to go for you. to see if the humour is going to land. Just reading it, I'm not sure that would come across as well, but as a British person with British humour, the human stuff and lightheartedness definitely kind of worked for me in this one, and I'm sure it will continue to do so as well. But those are like the 4 sort of main characters that make up the Thursday Murder Club. For me, Joyce and Ibrahim are my clear favourites. I hope we see more of Ibrahim in future books, because I do feel like him and Ron were kind of sidelined for most of it. But there's plenty of time for them to kind of get their dues. But yeah, an interesting set of characters. I think they're all, had very clear distinctions between them, very well kind of developed. And morally grey at times, I think it's safe to say, to get the answers that they need. But yeah, they are this club who, like to solve the unsolved murders from the past, and then a murder happens on their doorstep in this first one, and they decide to solve that one and try and work with the police on that, or at least a recently moved into the area kind of officer, and her superior, who kind of gets drawn into things as well. The people in the police that they're working with are called Chris and Donna. Chris is like the superior. I think he's like a DCI or something. I can't remember what Donna is. I think she's just a constable. And I loved those two so much. I loved their relationship. Chris is slightly older, so it's kind of, I think by the end it becomes like a father-daughter sort of bond. And I just really liked the kind of how their relationship develops and the back and forth between those two. They were easily my favourite like side characters in this, and I really, really hope we see more of them in future books. I think we're going to, but they were an absolute delight. I really enjoyed them whenever they were on the page. I was like, yes, very excited. Particularly Donna, because I think Donna also had a really fun relationship with the Thursday Murder Club. She's just moved to a new area after a breakup, a decision she regrets. Moving, not the breakup. And she's a bit frustrated that she's not getting any like good cases. And in this one, the Thursday Murder Club they take a shining to her and they orchestrate it so that she gets brought onto the case so that they can work with her to investigate the murder that happens. And I really enjoyed her relationship with all of them. And Chris as well, he does have some funny moments with the main characters. But Chris and Donna together are really great back and forth, and I hope we get more of that in future. This is a very character-driven novel. If you're here just for like a murder plot, and obviously that is a big part of it, is like the murder mystery. I think that takes some interesting twists and turns. I was confused basically all the way to the end where everything becomes clear, and I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. And there were some points that a reveal happens, and I was like, oh, I feel like that's really obvious. That's kind of underwhelming. It's a bit disappointing. And then they turn it on its head again, and like, oh, okay. I don't think I guessed anything that happened in this. I guessed who didn't die initially, because I was like, it's way too obvious to be him. And again, things get turned on its head and everything like that. And I enjoyed going along the ride. I try and read murder mysteries and not try and really work it out, because I do want to be surprised. But once you know kind of what's happening, you see how Richard Osman has very, very cleverly set up these big reveals at the end in like throwaway conversations, and I just didn't even register that like this certain thing that gets set up was going to come into play so significantly, because it's like there's no way like this murder case is related to something that seems just a completely separate scene altogether. It wasn't even about the murder, and then that comes into it and you're like, oh my god, that's really well done. So I did really enjoy the mystery in this one. I guess mysteries, because it does take some directions, and there is a big kind of plot point that happens. The book is split into two halves, like it's part 1 and part 2. The end of part 1 was a very, very welcome thing for me, because I was thinking like, I don't know if I'm going to still be interested in this mystery for another half of this book, but then there's a big twist, and it kind of propels the narrative and keeps going. So that was good. I think pacing wise and everything, this was actually really nicely handled, and I was constantly engaged in the mystery. I was really interested in finding out what was going to happen. Very satisfied with the answers that we got. Some of them were just really sad. I heard The Last Devil to Die is really sad and like the saddest book, and this one made me cry. So I think I'm screwed basically when I get to The Last Devil to Die. But this one was really good. I really enjoyed the mystery of that. And yes, the reveals we got I thought were pretty satisfying. It's definitely not the focus. It's definitely more character driven than plot driven, and personally I just prefer that. I prefer character driven stuff. And I do think all the characters in this one, for the most part, were really good, and the side characters were great. Chris and Donna were obviously my favourites. I really liked Bogdan as well. I hope we see more of him. I don't know if we're going to, because I feel like they do sort of wrap up an arc for him in this, but I really liked him. Elizabeth has a husband who I actually thought had a nice relationship with Bogdan, actually. We didn't see much of him, but he was cool. A few other side characters that kind of just are there to break your heart, ultimately. And they certainly do, so I guess that's good. So I was really invested in the characters. I will say, I'm not sure I like Elizabeth. I don't know if that's going to change. It's a really fine line when someone can be like really arrogant, but there's still like a charm to that, and you like them. Like Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock is so arrogant and so up himself, but you like him. Hercule Poirot is so up himself, but you still kind of like him. Elizabeth, I don't know. I'm struggling with her a bit. Ron, to some extent as well. Like some of his views, I was like, ugh, here we go, classic old man. But Elizabeth is she just assumes like the world's just gonna like treat her like she's royalty, and I don't know if I liked that. I like that that's her character, and I like that there is someone I don't necessarily like in the main group, because characters are different, and I like that one of our main characters necessarily is a bit harder to like than others. So I just think that's realistic. So it's not a criticism of the book that I'm not sure I like Elizabeth. But yeah, she just thinks like, oh, I can do whatever I want and there shouldn't be consequences to it, and if you do think there should be, you're wrong and you're an idiot. And that kind of annoyed me, but also that got shit done in the book and propelled the plot forward, so I think Elizabeth needs to be that way. And that only really started happening in the second half for me. In the first half of the book, her antics trying to get answers and stuff I thought were really funny. So I'm interested to see how my feelings about Elizabeth may change in future. I definitely would say of the main four, she was the one I liked the least. And she's definitely like the driving force of the plot in this one. Even though I say Joyce is like the mainish character, we get just as much from Elizabeth. So that'll be interesting to see if that continues in the series, like my feelings towards Elizabeth and whether or not they change. We'll see. I think they definitely have the capacity to, because her interactions with another kind of set of side characters who are like old friends of hers in this, I really enjoyed, and those were the scenes that made you think, oh, she does have a heart, she does really care. And I think some of the more emotional moments in the book did come from her. So I think it's in there for me to, I guess, get used to Elizabeth's personality and be like, okay, she's won me over. I think that will happen ultimately. It's that kind of deal. It's like Deke on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., who I hated when he was first introduced, and then within a few episodes I just loved him and would die for him. I'm thinking maybe we're going to go on that sort of journey with Elizabeth. Maybe not to that extent, but I think it's interesting that there's a character in this that I'm not necessarily a fan of how she goes about her life, but she gets shit done, and you've got to appreciate that. So yeah, this was a really, really strong start. I'd give this first one 4 stars. I think if the thing that held it back for me, I think the first 30-40 pages ish, I was kind of like, I think it was a bit all over the place, and the narrative at times kind of goes back and forth a bit. It's like a character will find out something, say like, oh, Steve has just phoned and this happened, and then the next chapter would be, say, Steve finding out about that thing and then contacting them. And the way the narrative kind of goes back and forth in time by not that much, really, and like jumps around a bit. I don't know if that's just the book trying to seem a bit cleverer than it is with that, to just have a slightly askew timeline just for the sake of it. That's how it came across to me. I feel like you could have just gone for the strictly linear route and nothing would have really changed. So that was a bit bizarre, but you do get used to it. I think that's just Richard Osman's writing style, and that's fine. But yeah, I think it was a bit all over the place as they were like setting up the characters in the world for the first like 30-ish pages. I was kind of like, it's fine, I'm enjoying it, but I really wanted to be impressed and I'm not. Then someone died. As soon as the body turned up, it sounds awful, as soon as someone died, I was like, I'm in, I'm seated. And then I could not put it down. So I got like 20 pages in, I put it down for like hours, and then I kept reading a bit more. Someone died, and then I was just like, oh, one more chapter, just one more chapter, this one's only a couple of pages, one more chapter, and then suddenly I was done. When I woke up this morning, I still had like half the book left, and I read it in one sitting. I just didn't stop, and it was a delight. So, real page turner. I was desperate to know what happened, so I think that just shows that's a sign of a good mystery. And I was just really enjoying the characters. They were really funny. The humour in this is really good. It was very well written. The side characters were great. I am really intrigued to see what mystery they can come up with next. At least another 4, because there's a 5th book out this year. So yeah, really strong start. I think it had it's a shaky beginning to the book, but a very strong start to the series overall. And I'm hoping that we can at least maintain this quality. But I'm hearing the general consensus is that the series gets better and better. So if I can give the first book a 4-star, I think we're kind of set up to, have something very fun and exciting and special on our hands with the rest of the series. But yeah, I'm excited for The Man Who Died Twice, just an intriguing title as it is, as a Doctor Who fan and a fan of Clara, who was like the woman who died twice in Doctor Who. I'm intrigued to see what this is going to mean and how it's going to come into play. The first line of the blurb of this one's like, it's the following Thursday. So I think it's going to be taking place pretty damn quickly after the events of the first one, which is giving me more hope that we're going to see more of the side characters that I like, because they might still be relevant to the Thursday Murder Club's lives currently. So, fingers crossed. And I think I have heard that the mystery in that one is one of the best in the series, so I'm intrigued and I'm looking forward to that. I don't know when I'm going to get to it yet. Obviously, you'll know when I do, because that's when I will next record something for this video. But I'm still in the middle of reading Jurassic Park currently for my A to Z reading challenge. I got a bit distracted by Thursday Murder Club, I won't lie. So I'm going to get back to that now and prioritise that. So I'm not going to be picking up The Man Who Died Twice for a little while yet, but I will come back to you when I do. But overall, this is a very, very positive start to reading this series for the first time. Okay, so what you just saw, that footage I recorded then, was 3 days ago. And I was talking about, I think at the end of that, I'm probably not going to get to the next book for a little while. I've got other things that I need to be getting on with. I need to finish Jurassic Park, and it's probably going to, this is going to be a project that takes some time for me to get through all the books. I've now read The Man Who Died Twice. I've read The Bullet That Missed. And I'm 70 pages in to The Last Devil to Die. So, I think it's safe to say this series has had me in a bit of a chokehold for the last couple of days. It starts as it always does. It's a slippery slope. I was like, you know what, I'll just read the first chapter of The Man Who Died Twice. Just to get a feel for it. And then I just kept reading. And then I was like, I'm really enjoying these. So I'm going to read the next one now. But these things happen, and I think when a book grips you the way these books have, you just got to roll with it. If you're not feeling something, maybe put it down and come back to it at a different time. But my body needed to read these books. They needed to know what happens. But yeah, I won't obviously talk about The Last Devil to Die until I finished it. But we do have 2 books to talk about, so let's get to that. So the second book, The Man Who Died Twice. I loved this. It was so good, even better than the first one. I'd give this 4.5 stars. The mystery is really interesting. I think it's definitely the best mystery that I've encountered in this series so far. I think this is the strongest of the books that I've read so far. The character work is just so good. The twists and turns in the investigation and the case and all of that. It's so well paced and plotted. I could not put this down. And while I do think, if I had one thing to say properly, I did think it took too long for a body to show up in this. I think it was over 100 pages before anyone died in this. I do kind of, what I was reading, because we were just like introducing some new characters, we were getting, just catching up with things, and I enjoy living with these characters, even if like the plot isn't necessarily advancing. I was just enjoying what I was reading, even if I feel like maybe there was a bit too much of that before the plot happened. I think maybe it was a bit too character focused for the first like quarter or so of the book. I did enjoy what I was reading, so I don't know if I'd even necessarily change it, but I still felt like something bigger needed to happen, or the mystery needed to kick off sooner than it did. But honestly, other than that, I can't fault this. I just had such a great time with it. I just could not stop reading it. And yeah, even before a body shows up and people die or whatever, I was like really, really invested in this. The characters are just easily the strongest aspect of this series, and they're just so much fun to just live with and inhabit this world with them. Joyce and Ibrahim are definitely still my favourites, and Ibrahim has like a little subplot to himself in this book. He has a lot more focus, which I really appreciated. And it was very sad and kind of bittersweet, and you just felt awful for him for what he goes through in this one. But it's like a lovely journey as well, and I did like that we got a bit more insight into how he works. And I would die for him. I would die for basically all of them. I kind of struggled with Elizabeth, certainly in the first book, and Ron to an extent as well. I really enjoyed them both in this one. I've definitely warmed up to them. They're not like my favourite characters by any stretch of the imagination, but I think, Elizabeth is kind of, the mystery in this one is focusing about her and her past, and I do feel like now reading this, you just understand Elizabeth a bit better, and I kind of wish they delved into a bit of her backstory just a little bit more in the first one. She can kind of be like, okay, that's why you're the way you are. I wish it didn't take so long, because we get so much information about Elizabeth and her past in this one. I feel like some of it could have come in the first one, and then still saving a bunch of it for this. I think that would have helped me warm to Elizabeth a bit quicker, but I understand her a bit more now, and I can be like, okay, it makes sense why you're this way. She still is arrogant and assumes things just need to go her way, and that's how it should be, but you do kind of get used to that, I guess, and you do see very much so that she does have a heart and she does really care about her friends. And I feel like that there was a coldness to her in the first book that I guess you want to take your time to reveal these things about characters. I understand that, but having read this one now, I'm like, yes, okay, I'm on board with Elizabeth. Ron was really good in this one as well. I still don't feel like he had like the most focus, but he had a few little fun side adventures that I quite enjoyed. Him and Bogdan from the first book, who came back in this one, he seems to be like a recurring character. They had a fun little pairing in this that I enjoyed. Chris and Donna from the first book showing up again, and having read the next book and a bit, they are just staples in the series, which very much pleased me. I love their camaraderie so much. They're really fun, they kind of get even more integrated with the group in this one. There's little kind of just side pairings of characters that go off and do stuff, and they're all delightful. There isn't a combination of characters in this that just doesn't work. I'm not as interested in this, which is great. The side characters, I think for the most part, the new characters that are like part of the mystery that we meet, I didn't really care that much about them, but we do get a good insight into them. I think the most interesting one probably was Connie, who's like this drug dealer. We get a few kind of glimpses into her head and her point of view at times, which was interesting. and yeah, to kind of see how things unfold with this and how the mystery kind of pans out. Some really clever kind of resolutions to this, I thought. And I was like so close to working some things out, so when they kind of got revealed as like, yes, that makes sense, I was kind of going down that route. So I think there's some good setup and payoff to the mysteries in this one. And yeah, it was just a really good time. I couldn't put it down. Blasted through this in like a day and a bit. I particularly love Joyce, and obviously in the first book we get a bit of her like first person writing from her point of view because she's writing a diary. That continues in all the books. And in this one, she's so funny. She's definitely, I think, my favourite character. I mean, her, Ibrahim and Bogdan are probably my favourite characters. I probably put Donna in there as well. But, oh my god, she joins Instagram in this one. And there's a section where she chooses her username. Oh my god, it was like 2 a.m. when I read that, and I had to... It took everything in me to stop myself from laughing out loud when I read what her username was, and like her just complete misunderstanding of Instagram and her bewilderment because I don't want to wake everyone else up. It was just so funny. And yeah, you know, it comes back in interesting ways as well. And yeah, I just, having read books beyond this as well, you know, you kind of see things being laid, not get paid off in like the next book as well, in terms of like stories like Joyce has Instagram now and stuff like that. So the natural progression of the characters and, you know, how they adapt to the ever-changing world just continues throughout the books and comes in useful for them, which is great. So yeah, that was absolutely hilarious. And the way that Richard Osman drops the title, The Man Who Died Twice, near the end, was a real gut punch. Very effective. So, I mean, how dare you, Richard Osman, basically. But also, thank you, Richard Osman, because this was so good. And then we come to The Bullet That Missed, which is obviously the third one. This is actually my least favourite, I would say, so far. I gave this 3.5 stars. So, you know, 3.5 stars is still really good. But I think the mystery in this one wasn't as interesting to me. I don't know if it's just because it wasn't as well executed as the mystery in the first two, or because maybe I'm just used to Richard Osman's writing style a bit more, so I can kind of recognise, okay, that's setting something up, that's going to come into play, and that allows me to work things out. But I worked out who the killer was in this one about halfway through. I worked out how they were going to get caught out and how the group were going to find out that it was them. And, you know, that's not a bad thing, because I think that shows that the mystery has been set up, you know, coherently, that you can piece things together. I don't like it when it's like, here's a thing you never would have worked out as an audience member, and that's, you know, that's why this person did it. You know, I like them, I want to be left clues to be able to work it out myself before the reveal. And that certainly is the case with this one. And yeah, so I did work that out, and almost immediately there was something I just assumed about the mystery that turns out to be the case, and they reveal that quite near the end. It's like a da-da-da, this is, you know, this happened all along. I was like, I feel like that was just the obvious thing. Like, why is that a big reveal? So I don't think the mystery was as strong. It was still interesting and engaging, but I wasn't as invested in that side of things. I think there were probably too many characters thrown into this one for me to keep track of. Well, not to keep track of. It was more so that I felt there were so many characters and so many points of view that we probably go like 60, 70 pages sometimes without checking in with other characters. You know, there were times where I was like, we haven't seen Chris and Donna in ages. And I felt that's just because there were so many characters to juggle, and I don't know if we necessarily needed all those characters in there. Or certainly not points of view chapters for them, I would say. You know, it makes sense that they're part of the story, but we spent so much time in their heads that I feel like we didn't really need. So, you know, to that aspect, I guess, I think it kind of watered down the mystery a bit. I maybe felt like things were like, you know, I want to see the characters I love, and we're not getting as much of them as often. And I don't think that needed to be the case. So, you know, that was a one thing. And Ron has sort of a side plot in this one, like a romantic subplot, that I feel like also took up way too much time, and I feel like we didn't need as much focus on it. There was one sequence in particular which was amusing, where he goes for like a couples massage, but I feel like the chapter lasted way too long than it needed to, and I feel like we just didn't need it at all by the end of the story. I can see why it's in there, but I also feel like it didn't need to be. So, you know, there's just a few things like that I felt like, you know, the pacing wasn't as tight as the first couple were, and the mystery definitely wasn't as tight as the first couple either. But, you know, these characters are still so good. You know, still so many laugh out loud moments in this. I think Elizabeth is probably at her best in this one as well, for me. You know, Joyce and Ibrahim and everything are just a delight. And yeah, there's like a romantic pairing between two characters in this that was like, that makes so much sense, obviously. And, you know, I don't want to like give away major plot spoilers and stuff like that, for, like, who did it or anything like that, who dies, you know, that kind of thing. Although what I will say as well is this, they finally kind of live up to the premise of the Thursday Murder Club in this one, which I think is a nice kind of change of direction. Because, you know, the Thursday Murder Club is supposed to be this group of people that come together to solve unsolved murders from years ago. But, you know, they got distracted by a current day murder in the first book and then again in the second book. But this one, they're actually investigating a murder that happened 10 years ago and like trying to solve that. So, you know, they're actually doing what the club was supposed to be doing in this one, which I thought was a nice kind of way of changing it up a bit. And obviously, you know, things go from there, but I do kind of enjoy that. Stephen and Bogdan's friendship is like my favourite thing. They're so wholesome and so sweet. And there's a moment between them near the end of this one that is such a gut punch and makes me so nervous for the last devil to die. That, yeah, I think I know now, or at least have an inkling of what might happen in the last devil to die that allow people to like say like it's a really sad one. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. I mean, there hasn't been as much hint of that currently, and I'm 70 pages into it, so maybe not, but we'll see. Yeah, this was good. Definitely not my favourite. I do think this is probably the weakest of the three that I've read, but the characters are still so good. You know, the mystery was fine, if, for me, a bit predictable, which isn't necessarily a criticism, but, you know, if you like to be surprised, maybe you're not going to enjoy this one as much, because I think you might be able to work at least some things out. And yeah, maybe too many characters, but some are used in surprising ways. Connie, the drug dealer from the second book, is back in this one, which I wasn't expecting, and she's kind of, you know, she has a bit to do and a bit to get involved, so she's continued to be developed, which I feel like a lot of mystery series like this wouldn't do, and wouldn't keep people involved in previous mysteries or whatever around for sequels and like continue to develop their characters. So that's interesting to see, you know, if her character goes even further than this. But, you know, so there are still plenty of surprises in this one. It delves even further into Elizabeth's past as well. I do kind of hope that isn't just the core thing in every single book. It's like, oh, here's someone from Elizabeth's past, or, you know, Elizabeth's past can allow us to make this a bit easier for ourselves. I would like it maybe to centre around another character a bit more, but still, this was really good still, and you know, the characters still continue to shine. There's still a lot of joy in this. I read this in a day, so, you know, I still obviously really enjoyed it. Rich Osman has such like page turnery writing and some really laugh out loud humour, but yeah, I think the overall mystery was a bit diluted and not as strong. So if you are reading these for like the mysteries and stuff, this probably won't be your favourite either. But also I think the characters really do carry it through. So it's still great, but probably my least favourite. And that will bring us on to The Last Devil to Die. As I said, I'm about 70 pages in. You know, I'll leave my thoughts actually. I was going to tell you how I felt so far, but I'll just wait until I've finished it, and then we can do like a big roundup and conclusion. But I'm looking forward to getting through this. Hopefully it will only take me a couple of days. I expect it won't take me much longer than that, because again, this series has just kind of gripped me. And then I'll be all caught up and ready for September when the 5th book comes out, so that's very exciting. Yeah, I will check back in when I've finished this. Okay, it's the next day, and we're done. Last Devil to Die, read. Thursday Murder Club series, caught up with. Hotel, Trivago. This was so good. I loved it. 4.5 stars. Definitely on the same level as The Man Who Died Twice. I think The Man Who Died Twice has the best mystery still, but this is definitely a close second. A minor character from a previous book gets murdered right at the start, but I would say The Last Devil to Die is different from the others. This one I feel like is less about the murder and the like murder mystery. Out of all the books so far, I think it's less about that and more about other plots and the character stuff. Which I'm all here for because I love the character driven kind of stuff, and that's definitely the case for The Last Devil to Die. If you are coming to these books for like the trademark humour that Richard Osman has, you will still find a lot of it in this, but definitely not as much as the other books, just because of the subject matter of this one and the themes they explore in this one. There's not as much room for like lightheartedness and humour. And from what I've been reading since finishing this, I think the 5th one that comes out this year is going to be a more lighthearted affair, because this one got quite heavy. And my God, did it get quite heavy. Very, very emotional read. I cried quite a few times during this. And this, I think honestly this could have easily been the last one. I think if he had just left it here, I think that would have been fine. I don't know if because he took a year out after this one, maybe he's thinking, just in case I don't go back to it, I'll write this as a conclusion. And I think it definitely serves with that. I think this could easily have just been left here and the series would have been fine. And I think this would have been a very nice, satisfying conclusion. I'm glad it's not, because, I guess there are some things that I was like, I would like to see this maybe happen at some point, and now there is still an option for that because the book's going to keep coming. It's not like this ended on like a massive cliffhanger and then he's like, I'm not actually writing the next one next year, you're going to have to wait 2 years for the 5th one, sorry. I think he left it in a place where like it's not like I need to know what happens next right now, and it would have been a very like aggravating wait for the next book to come out. So good, so character driven, so sad and bittersweet, and it explores so much about end of life and dignity, love, friendship, all these like really core beliefs that I think become even more important to you the older you get. And obviously everyone in this book, well, the main characters in this book, the Thursday Murder Club members are kind of pushing 80, and there's just a lot of, there's like an overarching story that's been going since book 1 that kind of comes to a conclusion in this one in a really emotional, powerful way. It kind of has some internal debates about the ethics of how that's wrapped up as well. Some characters maybe disagree with what happens, but they understand why it had to happen. I don't want to properly delve into the actual spoilers and stuff, but that's some of the emotional core of it. And then the murder mystery is kind of like this drug smuggling operation that goes wrong, and this character from a previous book ends up dead and they need to find out who did that. But a lot of that time that does take a back seat, and I think it should do, because at this point you do love the characters, and I think they'd certainly come first. There's also a little side story. Don't know if we needed it, but I can see why it's there, and it kind of does come into sort of fruition at the end, where another member in the retirement community is getting scammed by, they're getting like catfished and stuff, and having all their money stolen to send to this mysterious woman that they're in love with who, doesn't actually exist. That there is kind of a payoff to that of sorts. I still don't know if it was needed, but I didn't dislike it at all. And I suppose it's there because it gives some of the other Thursday Murder Club members, it gives them something to do when they're not maybe like the main focus in the murder investigation. The side character in this one pretty good. Some kind of just went a bit under the radar and didn't really care about. Maybe we were introduced a bit too late. But some nice surprises of who we see again, and it definitely isn't a series where I think definitely you can't read this one standalone. I mean, you could. I don't think you'd understand what the hell's going on. You wouldn't understand where the character's coming from. You'd follow the basic murder mystery plot, but the emotional payoff would be nowhere near as impactful, I think, if you haven't read the first 3. if you were you wanted the essentials, I would say you could probably skip the first one, but you'd have to read the other three. Would be my advice. But honestly, I recommend just reading all four of them because they're all really good. As always with this series, a really strong kind of character beats in this, really strong mystery elements to it. I worked out who did it maybe 10 pages before the characters did, which I think is a pretty good kind of way of setting all that up. And there is actually, what I really liked is that Richard Osman clearly trusts his readers and doesn't think they're stupid, because there is like a big reveal for a character that I guessed as soon as one particular thing happened, as soon as someone said something in particular, I was like, I know what your deal is, I know what the twist of your character is going to be. And it does kind of almost feel like an obvious moment in a way, but I was like, so they're going to reveal that, and the character's going to be like, oh, because you said this like 100 pages ago, I knew this and I worked all this out, blah blah blah. That never happens. It's solely there so that the audience, or the readers, can work out that twist to that character, which then gets later revealed. But I thought they were going to kind of mention that moment that clicked it for me earlier, but they don't. It's just, if you work it out, good for you. We're not going to like spoon feed you like, I remember when you said this. Whoa, aren't we clever? Which I did really like. So it's just there for you to work out, and it's not brought up again as that is like the gotcha moment. So I like that. It's just showing like, you guys reading this aren't dumb, which I appreciated. On the other hand, one of the reveals at the end, it does the thing that I don't like, where something's revealed that you couldn't have possibly have guessed because there's no proper setup for it. It's just like a twist for twist's sake rather than something that's been set up. And some of those are fine, and it does work within the characters that are involved in that. But for me personally, it feels a bit cheap that it can do that and pull the rug from under you like that. So I guess there's a balancing act to that. Some good, some bad in terms of I guess personal taste is how you're going to react to any of those things. But yeah, elements like that. There was also a little side mystery that honestly I think Richard Osman just forgot about until the end of the book. It gets mentioned a couple of times really early on that there's this like mysterious motorcyclist, and I'm fully happy to tell you about this because it goes nowhere, and it's literally such an underbaked thing. He tries to explain it away right at the end, but honestly, just take it out entirely. It's like some mysterious motorcyclist is like observing some events a bit early on in the book, and then obviously it's not mentioned for like 250 pages, and then it's like, oh yeah, that was that. It feels like, was that, maybe it was just a red herring that then gets explained away, but honestly, I don't think you needed it. Just cut the references to that kind of little thing, that little mystery out, because there's no point to it. But still, everything else I really enjoyed. Some really fun new side characters in this. Computer Bob is a standout. He has a really impactful moment with Ibrahim, and Ibrahim has a lovely little moment to himself in this one, which confirms something I suspected about him since maybe book 2-ish. An element of his past, which I it was nice to see confirmed. Kind of a bittersweet reveal. And I'm intrigued to see if that's going to kind of go forward as well. But, still more and more getting revealed about the characters as time goes on. Elizabeth was great in this one. I think, she's gotten better and better for me as the books have gone on. Stephen, Elizabeth's husband, was fantastic. Bogdan, Chris and Donna, all of them are really great. Ron had a good little struggle, I guess, in this one. Continuing his romantic kind of plotline from the third one. And there's a bit of humour in that. We get a couple of cameos from characters from earlier in the series that we may not have seen for a while, which again gave me kind of the feeling of ish like, if this was written to potentially be a last one in case he never returned to it after a break. Obviously that isn't the case, but there's kind of fan pleasy-ish moments to this, but it still very much stands on its own in terms of the plot, and it's so emotionally impactful. The end of the first part had me in pieces. The fucking acknowledgements at the end of the book made me cry. For God's sake, Richard Osman, what is wrong with you, sir? He talks about... I need to hold this together. He talks about... There's a character in this. It has a little cameo, a little brief appearance of the cameo of this character. Not a big part of it. And at the end, Richard talks about that. That is his wife's father has a cameo in this book because he never got to meet his wife's dad. And it's like, this is my way of saying hello to him and an introduction to him from me. It was like. So even the fucking acknowledgements after I was already emotionally devastated when I finished it, I read the acknowledgements at the end, and then that just made it even worse, and I was there crying in the club. Just so emotional, and such an amazing payoff to 3 books of build up to get to the storyline that they tackle in this one. And yeah, just a really good mystery, one of the strongest ones for sure. A good set of side characters, a very kind of satisfying resolution to everything, some nice reveals. And yeah, I really, really adored this. I think the main flaw was just that it juggled a little bit too much, and I think it could have been trimmed down a bit and a bit sharper in terms of what elements are featured. I think you could have cut a few things out. But definitely not to the extent that I feel like The Bullet That Missed kind of had that extra padding in there that kind of diluted the kind of book a bit. It's certainly nowhere near as bad with The Last Devil to Die. But yeah, the character work is so good. They're the shining stars of this series. I've loved following their journey thus far. And there's some really great moments for all of them in this one. And I can't wait until September to read the 5th book when it comes out, The Impossible Fortune. I can only imagine what the audiobook for this one's like. I imagine it's even worse. I think I'd cry even more an audiobook of this, because hearing the words and stuff performed in this, some of the lines, I took pictures on my phone on some of the lines in this just because I thought they were so lovely. Yeah, so this one is the most emotionally impactful for sure, incredibly devastating. A nice little title drop again. Richard Osman is very good at dropping the titles in very unexpected ways. Sometimes the titles of the books aren't actually connected to the main mystery or plot going on. It's just like something a character will say on the side, but you can kind of apply it to different things. And I think again in this, like the 3rd one, someone kind of says something that comes into fruition. So I think I am kind of recognising something in Richard Osman's writing. Like, so someone says something in this, just making a statement about human behaviours, human relationships and stuff. I was like, that is going to be like a key thing to the answer to this mystery, and it was. And he did that in The Bullet That Missed as well. He does it in this one, I think more effectively in this one, because it still took me by surprise. And yeah, it's just, he's very good at his plots, is Richard Osman, and he's even better at his characters. And I'm definitely going to be checking out We Solve Murders, which is his other, I don't think it's a standalone, I think it's the start of a new series, but it's like a father-in-law, daughter-in-law, detective duo, I think. And I will check that out at some point, because he's good at what he does, clearly. But I'm so excited for the 5th book in September. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of this little reading project. We are caught up with the Thursday Murder Club. I read them all in less than a week, which I think is testament to their enjoyment and their quality. So page-turnery, so well written. The characters are amazing. The mysteries are really good. I haven't read nearly enough murder mysteries, and these are great examples of them. The British humour, at least for me as a British person, really works. There are a lot of references, a lot of unfortunate references really. Anyone who's mentioned in this series has either been cancelled since this, or they've died since this. I'm like, oh my god, you've got a really bad track record of mentioning people in this book, Richard. Maybe you should stop doing that. But, there's an amusement to that as well. But, maybe if the British humour isn't going to land for everyone, obviously, and I probably would recommend, if you're into audiobooks, getting the audiobooks in that respect, because I think the humour will come across better when it's performed by someone reading it. But if you do just get British humour and British references anyway, definitely just tackle these head on and you'll have an absolute blast of a time. It'll be really interesting to see what other people's favourite books are. But to go from least to most favourite, definitely least would be Bullet That Missed, and then I'd go Thursday Murder Club. Kind of torn between these two. I think for someone who loves the characters as much as I do, and for like the emotional impact and how much this story emotionally affected me, I think a very close second is The Man Who Died Twice, and then very close first, The Last Devil to Die. I think objectively, The Man Who Died Twice is the better book, but this one really hits you in the feels, and I really love the character journeys in this one in particular. Although I think overall, if you're looking for like a murder mystery and you could only read one of these books, I would definitely read The Man Who Died Twice. But for impact, it just clinches it, I think, as my favourite for The Last Devil to Die. That's a subjective one. Objective, definitely The Man Who Died Twice would be the best one, but I think this is probably my favourite. That's the end of this project, I suppose. I've had an absolute blast kind of going through these books for the last week or so. And let me know if you've read them, what your thoughts on them are, or if you're inspired to give them a try. If you don't like them, sorry. But I really love these. I would highly recommend them. If you're just a fan of good character work, definitely check these out. If you're a fan of murder mysteries, check these out. A really lovely set of characters and side characters. Highly recommend the Thursday Murder Club. Richard Osman, how dare you, sir, for this one. But I will forgive you because they're so good. So that's everything. That is my thoughts on the Thursday Murder Club. I'm sure there'll be maybe more videos like this if people want to see more videos like this on other book series that I've been meaning to try. I do have one high fantasy series in mind, but I think it's 16 books and they're really chunky. So that might take me a while to get a video up about that one. But, there are other series that I would like to maybe do this on, but I don't have any set in stone thoughts just yet, so I'm not promising anything. But yeah, Thursday Murder Club, big success. Do check them out, and hopefully you won't regret it. If you do, I'll delete your comments. I won't really, that's mean. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Richard Osman for dominating my life for the past week, and I will see you when I see you.